All right, moving along then to our last piece, Schubert again. We saw him earlier with Golijov's piece. Now I have a piece just Schubert all by himself this time. Austrian composer, again, Austria is the place to be when Schubert's around. This is where all the composers are coming to. If they're not born in Vienna and Austria, they come there. Beethoven comes there, Mozart was there, Haydn would come there, and Schubert, Brahms, a lot of them, the Schumanns. I mean, it just is the place to be. And he's 25 years younger than Beethoven, but dies only a year after Beethoven. So very much contemporary, even though he's the next generation, and living like everybody else is in Beethoven's shadow. Beethoven has a huge impact on him. As far as what's going on in society, the Napoleonic Wars have ended, so the royal patronage system has been wiped out. Nobody has any money to pay a composer anymore, where it used to be you get a job with the royal duke or whatever, and he would pay you to write music. He's out of money from fighting Napoleon. And on top of that, it's just not cool to be a court composer anymore. Beethoven made that, passé. That's what amateurs do. The real musicians compose to compose, not for somebody else what they want. And so it's kind of a whole new world for composers to have to live in and find a way to make a living. And we talked about that's why he wrote, part of why he wrote a lot of those Lieder and piano pieces. He does write some symphonies like the one that we will hear. So he is a very talented young musician, but even so, he's expected to do what most boys do at this time, in this place, which is you do what your dad did, right? And Dad was a principal at a school, so he was supposed to become a teacher and do the same sort of thing that he did. Well, he did that, and of course, he was writing music like mad on the side, a lot of those art songs. He's cranking those out even though he's teaching. Especially those Lieder. He lasts about a year as a teacher. I found this piece of art. You can see how much attention the boys are paying to Schubert and how much attention that Schubert's paying to the boys. So he only lasted a year. During that year is when he started working on this third symphony that we'll hear. He actually wrote the first movement at the end of the school year in May there, and maybe we'll start a little listen to that first here. So this is what he's writing when school's almost out, and I think he wants it to be out more than the students do. Now, it starts out typical of symphonies for his time and similar to the ones that he would have been familiar with of Beethoven and Haydn and Mozart. Starts with a slow introduction. After we get past the slow introduction, it'll take off into the fast sonata form. Quite a long, slow introduction, so I'm going to skip some of it for the sake of our time. Once he gets into the sonata form, you'll notice that he tends to use the wind instruments to introduce the themes, and we'll hear those themes, a couple of those themes. So there's the clarinet, right? Introducing our first little thing, very bouncy. School's almost out. So if you're here last time, we talked quite a bit about the sonata form in connection with the piano concerto. It's very similar here. We have a first theme, which we heard, that bouncy little clarinet thing. Right now it's moved into the bridge. It's going to transition to a new key, And then we'll have a second theme, which we'll hear in the winds as well, and it's equally bouncy. He's just really happy. Here it is. So there's our second theme. So he's following very much what's expected for the first movement structure and all those sort of things, and goes on there. So you saw kind of there before I passed through it, the rest of the symphony he composed at a just astronomical rate. He composes the second, third, and fourth movements in 9 days, in mid-July after school's out. So just really seems to have awakened his creativity to get out of the classroom. So as we go into the second movement, it's interesting, it's marked allegretto, which is rather fast for a second movement. Usually the second movement is the slow movement of a symphony, and it is the slow movement of this symphony. It's just not very slow. Allegretto is, allegro means fast, allegretto means a little fast. So it's not super fast, but it's not really very slow. It's not really a slow tempo marking. You notice, I'll start playing some of it here, that it's quite light and delicate, has a little bit of the kind of high society style to it that he's used to hearing in the music of Haydn and Mozart and those who did compose for royalty in those court positions. So you hear that kind of delicate, aristocratic, you know, so that you could lift your pinky while you're drinking tea sort of sound, right? Now the third movement, interestingly enough, is marked also faster than usual. It's interesting because he still calls it a minuet. Now a minuet is a dance, and it was a dance that was done amongst the royalty, and it had been a standard part of a symphony, you know, for a long time. Haydn and Mozart always had minuets as the third movement, and it was this very aristocratic dance. Now Beethoven, before this, in his Fifth Symphony, had changed the third movement. And he changed it from a minuet and he called it a scherzo. Now, one of the things that was different, what Beethoven did, is to change it to be way too fast, to be danced, to be this minuet dance. Well, Schubert also changes it to be really fast. I mean, he marks it to be, vivace, which is a very, very fast tempo, which is way too fast to dance this thing. You know, it'd be like trying to waltz to something that's moving way too fast. But he still calls it a minuet. So I don't know if that's because he's just too timid to be bold enough to change the title from the standard tradition like Beethoven was, or if it's because the style is still a little bit more of that delicate, proper society sort of sound, as opposed to the rough and raw sound that Beethoven sometimes writes in there. So way too fast to be a proper minuet, but it calls it a minuet. Still has a lot of the other characteristics, triple meter, the structure, those sort of things. Our last movement is also fast. He marks it presto vivace, very, very fast. So this whole symphony is quite, moves along. He writes these kind of long dynamic waves that kind of accompany. Starts it, rather than starting with a big loud finale for it, he starts it soft and rushed, and then it kind of gradually grows to these fortissimo chords, and then it kind of starts over again in these kind of waves of dynamics that's fun to listen for. Full of energy, kind of rounding it off with a similar kind of energy to the Rossini overture. I think it's a great way to bookend the concert. See what I mean? Similar to the Rossini in that kind of bouncy energy. Part of how he's doing this is the key. Different keys had different associations. I mean, these days musicians, any key is anything, but back then it seemed to be there were certain keys that people kind of associated with things, and D major was a very bright key that was typically used for very joyous and exuberant sort of things. And so he puts it in D major, and 2 is the meter. He puts it in a 6/8, which is a really, it's that really bouncy sort of, that kind of lilt to it, which comes from a fast 6/8 tempo. I'm just going to skip a little bit to the end. So big finish. Oh, and even applause on the recording. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. All right, so we have, I've got to get this to work again. All right. So kind of themes we've got going on, some things that I think tie this, even though we have 5 very different composers in some ways, wrap things up well. We have this really joyful energy in our beginning and our ending with this overture and this whole symphony that's just, everything's revved up a notch as far as tempo and just really joyful energy. And then we have this kind of exploration of sound, both with the Feldman creating those sound worlds and the way that Golijov is taking a new look at old music. And then, of course, we have that idea of really personal expression, both in the Golijov and also that very poignant little prelude from the middle of that tragedy in that opera. So that's kind of our themes. Questions for me? Yes?
I guess it was also for the progressives already too fast when they started. Now they're all like fast music. But when I see Mozart, Schubert, or Bach, I like the more Chopin. In my age, maybe I like more the music, the floating dance music. And when you see Schubert, Beethoven, and Mozart, they have similarities in there.
Certainly, yeah. And there were certain expected tempos. Like I said, usually a second movement is expected to be slow. They kind of like to have the contrast, to start off with something that was maybe a medium tempo and then to have something slow to relax kind of after that. And which sometimes as a musician you appreciate it, because sometimes those first movements could be so difficult that you need a break for your fingers or for whatever it is you happen to be using. You enjoy that slow second movement for a physical break before you take off into the next quick thing.
Later on, you change the name from Beethoven without H.
Are you catching more typos of mine?
Oh, yeah. Go back.
Beethoven. That wasn't.
Did I miss it?
It's the Beethoven.
Beethoven. No, the other
No,
one.
wait.
It's spelled right.
Go back.
All right. You.
No, go forward.
No, it would have been.
Where you compared him to Haydn, Beethoven, and Mozart.
I liked it because
I spelled Beethoven right in that one too.
No, it was before that.
we saw it.
I think you're full of it.
Perhaps so, but it did say Beethoven.
No, maybe
Well, there's two E's. There's supposed to be two E's, you know.
it's the American Beethoven.
All right. Well, typos notwithstanding. Any other questions besides my?
we in the German language, we don't like the TH anyway because we don't have the TH, Beethoven, maybe. Beethoven.
Good. Anything else?
Great presentation. Thank you.
But it was beautiful.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, well, I'll enjoy.
You learn a lot
Good.
in 30 minutes, when that is.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoy the concert and get a little more out of it for something that you heard tonight.
And we love your presentation.
Oh, thank you very much. Have a good evening.